While he's lying in the road, we thought that we would try and make the most to share this incredible interaction between these cubs with you. And if and when Mvula does get up, which he will at some stage, we'll link back to Mark and see what happens there. They really are playing quite viciously with one another, but this is important for them to start establishing dominance even from a young age. And it is known that hyena can compete ferociously with their siblings, even to the point of death, either by outcompeting them when nursing or by physically killing them. And I don't think that's going to happen this morning, but they are certainly playing quite ferociously with one another considering their size. But there's certainly been no bullying or no evidence of anyone being dominant over the others. They're all taking turns to gang up on different individuals. We've tried to position the vehicle in the best position possible to cover all of their little playgrounds, but they're covering a bit too much ground for us to cover all the bases from one position, so bear with us when they run out behind the bushes, but it's not going to be worth us stopping and starting the vehicle every time, because as you can see, it doesn't take long for them to come back. And well done to Mark for finding that leopard. He spent a lot of time following up for that leopard this morning after the initial reports of some audio in that area. So well done, Mark, for finding Mvula. And what a beautiful leopard that is. You may notice how this adult is less tolerant of the slightly larger cub, and as I did guess earlier, it does appear to be the mother of the two smaller cubs. What's interesting about the hyena of the Sabi Sands is that not always, but very often the adults will head out and search for food alone. Now that's not always the case with hyena. They are always clan-orientated animals, so even here in the Sabi Sands where we do have small clans, there is a hierarchy and a clan system within which the hyenas will be associated. But like I say, it's often that they out alone, and that would explain why the other mother is not here at the same time, I guess. In other areas of Africa where clans move together when out looking for food, they would often then be on the same routine, and therefore be leaving the den sites and arriving back at the den sites at the same time. And that can be applied as a general rule to all animals in Africa. You get some animals that occur throughout huge areas in Africa, and their behavior will vary depending on the area that they live in. After all this playing around, they may have worked up a little bit of an appetite, it appears, and now will compete for the best spot with which to nurse. That's if their mother tolerates it. It looks like she may be trying to prevent them from nursing, and may have already allowed them to suckle when she arrived back at the den this morning. And her stomach looks nice and full. So she's had success feeding, possibly not last night necessarily, but within the last couple of days she's had a good feed. I'm going to have to reposition the vehicle now, ever so slightly, now that the mother has changed positions, so bear with me while we do that. It's interesting, she really does like lying in that specific spot as well, and you can almost actually see how all the soil below where she's sitting has been worn in, and she may well have also been urinating in that same spot. But you can see that's one of her favorite areas, and I've noticed on arriving at the den at other stages, that's often where she's lying. And I fear her movement has been because she doesn't want to be pestered by the cubs wanting to nurse, and if they continue to pester her, she will either give in, which it looks like she's just done now, or she would get up and move off. It appears now that she has given into the cubs' pestering and is now allowing them to suckle. It's incredible how obedient the slightly old cub is, because you can see it just sitting in the background there, minding its own business, and it would have received one or two nips from this mother when it tried its luck. So it would have been taught its lesson, but it is incredible, I find, how obedient such young animals can be. If you think to raising domestic dogs or cats, how uncontrollable they can be, and that's possibly because we don't raise them accordingly. Nicky's just mentioned that there's been quite a lot of chatter on Twitter regarding the noises hyena make, and they make a variety of different noises, but they are also known as these specific hyenas, the laughing hyena, as they do have a high-pitched cackle, which they typically let out in situations of excitement or fear, around kills, fighting with other clans, would be the most common scenario in which you would hear them letting off this loud laughing cackle. But they also have a whooping kind of a howl that's more typically the audio of general communication, not necessarily in high intensity scenarios. And I really hope we can share both sounds with you at some stage in the following broadcasts, because it is an incredible noise to hear, both the cackling as well as the whooping howl. The whooping howl, the laughing cackle, I'm not going to attempt to reenact, but the whooping howl I'll have a crack at now, and it goes something a little bit like this. So that's my hyena whoop, and it certainly does need some work. It's not very close to the real thing, but it gives you an idea of the noise they make, and that's their general communication. Typically noise that we hear at night, not so much during the day. They're certainly more vocal in the night time, and we do hear that whoop far more often than we hear the cackle. Just to give you an update on Mvula, he is still fast asleep in the middle of the road where you last saw him, which is perfect because the hyena are putting on a great show for us now, and I wouldn't be concerned. Mvula will certainly get up at some stage and keep moving, so there's definitely some action to look forward to there with Mark. Now, a lot of you may be wondering what genders these little cubs are, and it's very, very difficult to tell. The genitals of both male and female hyena look very, very similar, and especially when they are young, it can be incredibly difficult to distinguish between male and female. The males do have testicles, but so does the females. The females don't actually have the testicles, but they've got a kind of a fatty pouch which looks exactly like that of the men's. And the males have got a penis, and the females have got a greatly enlarged clitoris which resembles a penis. So to look between their legs and distinguish between the different genders is very, very difficult. And that is why we haven't even begun to hazard a guess as to whether these are male or female. And even when hyenas are adults, it can be difficult to be sure. Well, I speak on my behalf. Maybe I'm sure there are certain professionals that have spent a lot of time with hyena and researched them intimately that can look at them at a glance and tell you if they're male or female, but after all the years I've spent in the bush, it is very difficult, and I'd rather avoid being certain of my guesses as to whether they are male or female. One factor that is interesting is that the females are often larger than the males and are always more dominant than the males, so much so that the lowest ranking female would be ranked higher than the highest ranking male within a clan. And that's a rather large reversal in roles relative to most scenarios in nature. It's often that the men are bigger and more dominant than the females, but the hyenas are the other way around, which I find really interesting. So when looking at hyenas, if you do have a few very large individuals, you could assume that those would be the females and the smaller ones would be the men. Morning, Grace. Grace is asking whether when the other female comes back, the other mother comes back, would they all share this den together? And yes, they would. It's only the cubs that would live down in the den. The adults wouldn't go down there. So it's not a problem sharing. It's just the youngsters that share the den, so to speak. And both the mothers would hang out just outside the den as they are now, as this one is now, and nurse the cubs from this position. We could also possibly assume, and again it's just a possibility, that the other female is the more dominant one, and that is why she would have given birth ahead of this second female who's got the smaller cubs. And often in nature, when alpha females allow beta females to breed, it would be after their cubs have been born. So again, just a possible assumption that we could make. We've just got a comment through from Bob on Twitter mentioning that Tara, one of the other presenters, mentioned that the more aggressive individuals would be the females. And this is true, and thanks for pointing that out, Bob. That is another characteristic or feature that you can look at when watching hyena, especially the cubs, that the more aggressive would be the female, and that is because they are more dominant than the males. Sorry guys, I just copied the end of that message. Could you go again, please? Could any station please relay that last message? Copy. Thank you very much. I'd be exceptionally interested in that position, so I'm going to be leaving the hyena den site. Okay, copy, will do. Okay, Nikki, we're going to need a link back to Mark. Folks, we've just got some exciting news on the radio, and it's really exciting stuff. I'm not going to tell you anything more than that, but I'm going to have to start heading off in that direction. And we're going to cut back to Mark with Mvula.